You sat down at the table, opened the menu, and made what felt like a free choice. You weighed the options, considered the prices, decided what you wanted. The whole process took maybe 90 seconds and felt completely yours. You ordered, the meal arrived, you paid. And every single step of that experience was designed by someone who studied how you make decisions and built the menu to produce the outcome they wanted. Not approximately designed, precisely, with decades of behavioral research and eye-tracking studies and price-anchoring experiments and field tests informing every font choice, every column layout, every dollar sign that was removed or kept, every item placed in the upper right corner of the page. The menu is not a list of options, it is a persuasion document. And you have been reading persuasion documents as if they were neutral information your entire life. This is not about restaurants, it's about every price you've ever seen. Think about the last time you bought something that came with tiers, the basic, the standard, the premium. Or the 3 subscription options where the middle one seemed obviously correct. Or the cable package where the one you needed was never the cheapest one, but also never the most expensive one, and the most expensive one existed primarily to make the middle one feel like restraint rather than expense. Or the car trim levels, where the base model felt stripped and the top trim felt excessive and the one in the middle felt like what a reasonable person would buy. You bought the middle one, most people do, and the middle one was priced to be bought. The options on either side of it were not designed to be selected. They were designed to be rejected in favor of the middle. The decoy items, the anchor prices, the comparative structure that makes the target purchase feel like a rational compromise, these are tools and they were deployed on you, and they worked, and you called it a decision. How many times a week does this happen to you? How many purchasing decisions in your life, the restaurant, the subscription, the hotel room, the phone plan, the insurance tier, were actually independent choices versus outputs of a carefully engineered decision architecture? The answer, if you're being honest with yourself, is uncomfortable, and this is where it gets interesting. Because the menu trick, the psychological pricing infrastructure, the restaurant, is the simplest, most visible version of a system that runs in almost every commercial transaction you make. And the restaurant version is visible because you can see the whole menu at once, which is why it's useful to understand first. But the principles operate everywhere, in the real estate listing that prices a house just below a round number, in the retail price that ends in 0.99, in the financing offer that presents monthly payments instead of total price, in the limited time discount that creates urgency that wouldn't exist if you thought about it for a day, in the bundle that includes 3 things you want and 4 things you don't, priced as if you're getting the 4 things free. None of these are accidents. Every one of them is the result of someone understanding how your brain makes cost-benefit calculations and building the presentation to shift that calculation in their favor. Nobody taught you this, not in any useful, operational way. You may have heard the phrase psychological pricing before. You probably know that 0.99 feels different from a round number. But knowing the name of a technique is completely different from having trained yourself to see it operating in real time on you at the moment it matters. And the gap between knowing it exists and being able to defend against it in the moment is a gap that costs money continuously, invisibly, across thousands of transactions over the course of a life. You were too busy living inside the system to see the system. The game changed. Actually, the game never changed. The game was always this. You just weren't told the rules. Here's what nobody tells you about money. The science of how humans make purchasing decisions has been studied exhaustively, refined continuously, and deployed against you with extraordinary precision. Not against consumers in general, against you specifically, using data about your purchase history, your browsing behavior, your demographic profile, your moment of access, and your psychological vulnerability patterns. The dynamic pricing that shows you a higher price the second time you search for a flight after the first search established interest. The price that is higher on a Saturday evening when you're relaxed and more likely to spend than on a Tuesday morning when you're in transaction mode. The social proof that shows you how many other people bought this item recently, regardless of whether that number is real or the representation of it is honest. The countdown timer on the offer that may or may not correspond to any actual scarcity. This is not conspiracy, this is business, and it is the most advanced, best-funded application of behavioral psychology in human history, and it runs every time you open an app, a browser, a menu, a store. The wealthy don't think about pricing the way you were taught to think about it. The people who build real financial discipline, not the people who are naturally frugal or naturally indifferent to things, are the people who learn to insert a gap between the price presentation and the purchasing decision. Not a large gap, not a complicated one, just a moment of deliberate recognition. This presentation was designed to produce a specific feeling, and the feeling is not the same as the value, and I am going to evaluate the value separately from the feeling. That moment of recognition is the entire defense. Not willpower, not deprivation, the recognition. And once you learn to see pricing architecture, you cannot unsee it. You become permanently slightly outside the persuasion rather than inside it, and the compounded financial difference between those two positions over a lifetime is extraordinary. Let me tell you about a couple named Wei and Priya. They went through the same exercise. For 30 days, every time they were about to make a discretionary purchase of more than $50, they wrote down the pricing mechanism being used to influence the decision. Not whether to buy, just what the mechanism was. The anchor, the comparison. The false urgency, the bundle, the tire. By day 15, they'd started doing it automatically, without the notebook, as a reflex. The purchases that survived the recognition, the ones where they could name the mechanism and still decide the value was real, those they made. The purchases that dissolved when they named the mechanism, those they didn't. At the end of 30 days, their discretionary spending had dropped by approximately 22% with no deliberate restriction, no budget, no sacrifice. Just the recognition of the mechanism creating a moment of genuine choice where manufactured urgency had previously substituted for 22% from naming the trick. But there's something darker underneath this, because the restaurant menu and the e-commerce site are the obvious versions. The versions that feel external to you, something the seller does that you can learn to see and defend against. The darker version is the internal pricing psychology, the stories you tell yourself about what things cost, what you deserve, what signals certain purchases send to the world about who you are. These are not external manipulations. They are internal narratives that have been shaped by decades of cultural conditioning, brand positioning, and social aspiration, and they run with just as much effect as any menu design. The purchase that isn't about the item but about the identity signal. The brand you choose because the brand carries a meaning you want to associate with. The restaurant tire you select not because the food is proportionally better, but because the tier of restaurant you frequent says something to the people you're with and to yourself. The neighborhood you live in, the car you drive, the phone model you carry, these are not purely functional purchases, they are social expenditures. And the cost of the social signal is real and ongoing and was never included in any budget category because it doesn't have a name, just a pattern. Nobody taught you that you were paying for identity, they taught you that you were buying things. The game is run on two levels simultaneously: the external pricing architecture and the internal narrative architecture. And the second is harder to see because it lives inside the story you tell about who you are. Here's the first principle: every price you see is a starting point of a negotiation you've been taught not to have. The common belief is that prices are fixed, posted, settled, non-negotiable outside of specific contexts like car buying or garage sales. And in a transactional, cash register, retail floor sense, many prices cannot be negotiated in the moment. But the broader landscape of what you pay for services, for subscriptions, for insurance, for professional fees, for ongoing relationships with any provider is far more negotiable than most people ever test. The cable company has a retention offer that isn't listed anywhere. The credit card has an annual fee that can be waived for a good customer who asks. The gym membership has a rate that a new member would receive that a loyal member can often get if they inquire directly. The insurance premium can frequently be reduced with a single call, making clear you've shopped alternatives. These are not guaranteed, but the rate at which they succeed when attempted is significantly higher than the rate at which people attempt them, because people have been conditioned to treat posted prices as facts rather than as opening positions. The identity shift is from I pay what things cost to I determine what things cost me by engaging with the price rather than accepting it. Those are different relationships with every ongoing financial obligation in your life. The first person is a passive recipient of pricing decisions made by someone else. The second person has a practice, not an obsession, a practice of periodically questioning whether the price they're paying reflects current market conditions and their current leverage as a customer. And what happens next is the part most people miss. Here's the second principle: the bundling and the upgrade are not add-ons. They are the main mechanism. You came for the base product. The base product was priced to bring you in. The margin is in the upgrade, the add-on, the extended warranty, the premium tier, the bundle that includes things you didn't ask for. This is the structure of almost every retail and service business that has scaled, because the base acquisition is expensive and the margin on the upsell is where the business actually works. Which means the price you saw that attracted you was designed to attract you, and the price that funds the business is the one you encounter after you've already committed to the relationship. The extended warranty on the appliance, the protection plan on the electronics, the priority boarding on the airline ticket that was already priced to sell, the insurance the rental car company offers at checkout, with 10 seconds to decide when you're already standing at the counter with a line behind you. These are not afterthoughts. They are the primary revenue events the entire preceding transaction was designed to produce. And the time pressure, the commitment already made, the social friction of saying no to a person directly, all of this is part of the architecture that makes the upsell work at the rate it does. The reframe is simple and devastating. The first price is bait. The decision that matters is everything after the first price. And the everything after was designed to be decided under conditions: commitment bias, time pressure, social pressure, cognitive load from the primary decision already made that favor the seller's outcome. This is where it gets interesting. Here's the third principle: the price you see is not the price you pay, and the price you pay is not the cost. This is the layered version of everything else. The sticker price is not the transaction price. The transaction price is not the total cost of ownership. The total cost of ownership is not the opportunity cost. And the opportunity cost is the actual cost. What you could have done with that money, what it would have been worth compounded, what choosing differently would have produced. A car at $35,000 has a sticker price. The transaction price after financing, fees, and dealer add-ons might be $42,000. The 5-year total cost, including insurance, fuel, maintenance, and depreciation, might be $65,000. The opportunity cost of $65,000 over the 5 years at market returns is $85,000. The car cost $85,000 in the currency that actually determines your financial future. That number was never on the window sticker. It never appears anywhere, but it is the real price. The person who understands that the real price of any purchase is the opportunity cost, what the money could have become, makes different decisions. Not no decisions, not a life stripped of purchases. Different decisions. The purchase that provides genuine value that exceeds its opportunity cost survives this analysis. The purchase that was primarily a response to a pricing mechanism, the urgency, the anchor, the comparison, the identity signal, often doesn't. And the separation of those two categories, consistently applied over years, is where the financial gap between people of identical income opens up. Here's the truth about what has been happening. Every day you interact with commercial environments that have been designed at significant expense and with sophisticated expertise to separate you from your money in ways that feel like your own free choices. The menu at the restaurant, the website layout, the app interface, the store floor plan that puts the essentials in the bag, and the impulse items at eye level, and the checkout lane lined with small, high-margin items. The algorithm that shows you the item you browsed 3 days ago at a price that dropped to dollars, creating the sense of a deal that closed a purchase that would have otherwise been reconsidered. You navigate this every day. You have been navigating it your whole adult life. And you have been navigating it largely without the perceptual tools that make the navigation effective. Not because you're unintelligent, because you were never given the tools. The pricing architecture was studied and refined in academic and commercial settings that were never made available to consumers in a useful form. You got the vague awareness that advertising influences you. You didn't get the specific mechanism by which the menu produces the order. Now you have it. The question is what you do with it. Project it forward. If the pricing mechanisms operating on your daily decisions are responsible for even 15% of your discretionary spending, a conservative estimate given the research, the dollar amount over 10 years is not trivial. It is the gap between the financial life you're building and the one you could be building if that 15% were redirected with intention rather than captured by architecture. Compounded, that 15% is retirement years. It is options. It is the difference between a life where money is a constraint and one where it is a tool. 5 years from now, you will either have trained yourself to see the mechanism or you won't. The prices will keep being designed either way. So here's where you are: 2 paths. One requires no sacrifice, just a different kind of attention. The first path is continuation. You keep moving through commercial environments in the mode you've always used, responsive, reactive, making decisions at the speed the architecture was designed to produce them. The meals get ordered in 90 seconds. The subscriptions get upgraded because the tire difference felt worth it in the moment. The add-on gets accepted because the checkout counter person asked directly and saying no felt uncomfortable. The aggregate cost of the architecture operating on you continues at its current rate. The percentage of your spending that was produced by design rather than genuine choice stays invisible. And the financial life that could be, if that percentage were redirected, stays theoretical. The second path requires 30 seconds before the next significant purchase. Name the mechanism. Just name it, the anchor price that made this seem reasonable. The urgency that may or may not be real, the tire comparison that made the middle option feel like restraint. The identity signal that has a cost you haven't included. Name it, see if the purchase survives the naming. Often it will, that means it was a genuine choice. Sometimes it won't, that means it was the architecture making a choice that wasn't really yours. The difference between those 2 categories, over a life of transactions, is the difference between building wealth and funding the mechanisms designed to prevent it. Every price you see from here on is a starting point. What happens next is up to you.